There are people who wake up every morning with a knot in their chest. Not from heartbreak, not from failure, but from something worse. The quiet, suffocating weight of not knowing why they're still alive. Not suicidal, not hopeless, just deeply tired of searching, and that's what no one tells you. The search for meaning is not noble. It's a slow, elegant form of self-destruction. You can hide it behind your job, your children, your prayers, your goals. But at 2 a.m., when the world goes silent and your own mind grows louder, there it is again. The ache, the question you keep swallowing. What is the point of all this? People don't break because of pain. They break because their pain seems pointless. We've been taught that life must have a purpose, that there must be something out there. A calling, a destiny, a light at the end of the tunnel. But what if that light is just your own grave being dug one shovel deeper every time you ask, why am I here? Look around. A teenager scrolling for hours on a phone he hates because he doesn't know who he is without distraction. A successful CEO emotionally paralyzed the day after retirement because everything he thought gave him meaning was tied to a title. A mother who loves her child but secretly drowns in guilt because she thought that having a family would fill the hole. And it didn't. This is not nihilism. This is reality. And it's painful, not because it's dark, but because it's honest. We are told to find our purpose, like it's an item on a shelf, just waiting to be picked up. But what if this entire obsession with meaning is the very thing making us sick? What if searching for meaning is not the cure, but the disease? This isn't about giving up. It's about facing a truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Because once you look it in the eye, you can never unsee it again. This video isn't here to offer hope. It's here to tear down the walls you've built around that question and show you what remains when there's nothing left to search for. What if the crisis you're living isn't personal? It's structural. What if your confusion, your quiet sadness, your fatigue aren't flaws in your character, but symptoms of a culture that sold you a lie? We are drowning in freedom, and that's exactly why we're suffering. The more choices we have, the more pressure we feel to choose right. The more freedom we gain, the more responsible we become for justifying our existence. And slowly, silently, that weight becomes unbearable. In the past, people didn't need to ask what life meant. The structure answered for them: God, family, community, duty. But the modern individual, secular, self-aware, bombarded by voices, is left naked in front of the void with a single, paralyzing demand. Invent your own meaning and make it meaningful enough to justify your suffering. It sounds empowering, but it's psychological poison. French sociologist Jean Baudrillard once wrote, "We live in a world where there is more and more information and less meaning. We know everything. We feel nothing. We can Google the chemical structure of love, but we don't know how to feel connected. We can define success in 1,000 different ways, but it never feels real when we get there." There is a quiet violence in the way modern life convinces us that if you're unhappy, it's your fault, because you haven't found your true calling. And so we chase it like addicts: passion, purpose, authenticity, hollow words injected into every TED Talk and corporate retreat. But no one stops to ask, what if this search itself is the trap? Take the example of burnout in people who followed their dream job. They were told, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But what they found instead was this: when you turn your love into labor and your identity into a brand, you don't feel fulfilled. You feel used. Meaning has become a product, sold back to us by gurus, influencers, and billion-dollar industries. And just like any product, it leaves you emptier once the high fades. Even the language of finding yourself is deceptive. There is no self to be found beneath the noise, just an endless layering of roles, traumas, desires, and fictions. Philosopher Michel Foucault warned us, the soul is the prison of the body. The obsession with meaning is not a spiritual quest. It's a cultural symptom of late capitalism, where even your identity must produce something: value, clarity, sense. But what if the absence of meaning isn't a mistake? What if it's not something to fix, but something to understand? People are not dying from starvation of food. They are dying from starvation of context and of a reason why. And sometimes the cruelest thing is that they were promised one. Promised that meaning was out there, waiting for them, if they just worked harder, meditated longer, or aligned their energy. But here's the truth. The meaning you're chasing might not be out there. It might not exist at all. And confronting that, honestly, bravely, without flinching, might be the only way to finally breathe. If animals don't need meaning to live, why do we? Your dog doesn't ask why the sun rises. Birds don't have midlife crises. Trees don't feel existential dread. But you, with your glorious intelligence, your poetic soul, your brilliant awareness, you can barely make it through the week without feeling the creeping weight of futility. It's not a design flaw. It's the price of being conscious. Consciousness is a disease. Emil Cioran. We were given the gift of self-awareness, but no instructions. And what we found, sooner or later, was that this gift makes us suffer in ways no other creature can comprehend. There's a specific kind of torment that only humans endure. The torment of knowing we will die and still having to live, to eat, to smile, to work, to send emails and do laundry, all while carrying the knowledge that everything we do will be erased. Most people don't talk about it. But this tension, between the instinct to live and the knowledge that it's all impermanent, is quietly tearing us apart. This isn't depression. This is clarity. Albert Camus called it the absurd. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. You want answers, but the world doesn't owe you any. We've evolved to perceive time, to remember, to anticipate, to mourn. But no other species grieves the future before it happens. Only we do that. Only we look at our parents and feel them aging in front of us. Only we kiss someone while already feeling the loss of them. Consciousness lets us witness our own decay, in slow motion. Neuroscience confirms it. The prefrontal cortex, which gave us abstract thinking, also made us vulnerable to existential terror. We don't just live, we interpret our living, obsessively, relentlessly. We are not built to endure that forever. And that's where meaning comes in, not as a luxury but as anesthesia. We search for meaning not because we're spiritual, but because we're afraid. Afraid of the silence, afraid of the randomness, afraid that none of this suffering was for anything. So we build stories, religion, romance, legacy, justice. We invent systems that distract us from the truth, that we are accidents of the cosmos, hallucinating significance to keep ourselves from breaking. Life is unbearable, but we bear it because we believe it means something. Nietzsche, paraphrased. But what happens when the belief stops working? There's a reason many breakdowns happen, not after tragedies, but after success. When the goal is reached and the mask falls off, all that's left is you and your thoughts. You realize the meaning you built was scaffolding, temporary, fragile, hollow. That's why monks seek stillness, not to find peace, but to confront the terror we run from all our lives. The terror of being aware and knowing there's no escape from that awareness. We didn't ask to be this awake, but we are. And in that wakefulness lies the sharpest form of suffering, the kind that can't be explained, only endured. There are people who survived the Holocaust and still believed life had meaning. There are people who lived on beaches in paradise and quietly killed themselves. So let's stop pretending that suffering kills meaning, or that comfort creates it. Meaning is not a consequence of your circumstances. It's a fiction we build or refuse to, depending on how much truth we're willing to stomach. Two men, Viktor Frankl and Albert Camus, stood on opposite edges of the abyss. Both stared into the same darkness. But one wrote, "Yes to life, in spite of everything." The other whispered, "There is only one truly serious philosophical problem, suicide." Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz, believed suffering could be transcended if it had purpose. That meaning was not found in the world, but made through responsibility. He said, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Camus, exiled from every god and moral law, rejected this. For him, life had no higher purpose, but could still be lived lucidly, defiantly, beautifully, without lying to ourselves. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life. They are not enemies. They are two ways of walking through fire. We want Frankl to be right because his words heal. They let us believe that our pain is part of some arc, some story, some cosmic sense. And sometimes it works. Sometimes people survive unthinkable grief by attaching themselves to something bigger, a child, a belief, a duty. But then there's Camus, refusing to sell comfort. He says, what if there is no bigger picture? What if the only honest response to existence is to revolt, not by finding purpose, but by refusing to be crushed by the lack of it? Camus' hero is Sisyphus, cursed to push a boulder forever. And yet he writes, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Not because the task has meaning, but because the man accepts the absurdity and pushes anyway. That's the split we all feel but rarely name. We are torn between the need to believe and the unbearable clarity that maybe, just maybe, there's nothing to believe in. Your pain doesn't care about philosophy, but it does beg for coherence. And when it can't find it, it does something even more dangerous. It invents it. People cling to toxic relationships, failed careers, false gods, not because they work, but because they protect them from the horror of senselessness. That's why cults grow. That's why conspiracy theories spread. That's why we stay in jobs that rot us from the inside. The alternative, meaninglessness, is more terrifying than misery. And yet, in that terrifying void, there's freedom. To live without scripts, to stop asking what this all means and start asking how we'll live despite it. To become, as Nietzsche said, not a servant of truth, but its dancer. Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Übermensch, a rope over an abyss. Frankl gave us a lifeline. Camus gave us a mirror. Both point to the same truth. There is no inherent meaning, and somehow, in spite of that, you must live. There are days when the most honest thing you can feel is the desire to stop trying, not out of weakness, not because life is unbearable, but because the game itself has become ridiculous, a theater of false hope and forced purpose. It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late. Emil Cioran. He said it without flinching, because some truths are too naked for polite conversation. We are addicted to perseverance, to keep going even when the road leads nowhere, to never give up, even when we don't remember what we're holding on to. But Cioran offers a different kind of freedom, the freedom to let go, not out of despair, but out of lucidity. He didn't celebrate suicide. He didn't deny beauty. He simply removed the veil and asked, why are you clinging so hard to a life you didn't ask for and can't justify? Most people don't live, they perform. They run in circles, chasing validation, meaning, transcendence, as if one day something will finally click. But nothing clicks, not for long. The silence always returns, and Cioran tells us maybe that silence is more honest than any answer we've invented. Man starts over again every time he acts. He becomes his own myth. And maybe the worst myth is that life must be meaningful to be worth living. Think about how much violence is committed in the name of meaning. How many people destroy themselves and others, chasing redemption, destiny, legacy. Cioran's pessimism isn't cynicism, it's mercy. Because once you stop trying to make the chaos coherent, you begin to breathe again. That's the paradox. Only when you abandon the need for meaning can you actually begin to see what life is. Without filters, without agendas, without the compulsion to turn it into a motivational quote. He once wrote, "Only one thing matters, learning to be the loser." That's not resignation, it's clarity. In the West, giving up is treated like moral failure. But in many Eastern traditions, Zen, Taoism, surrender is the first step to sanity. Not submission, but release. Not indifference, but stillness. Modernity taught you to fight reality. Cioran invites you to sit with it, to feel its absurdity so deeply that it becomes almost beautiful. And here's the twist. When you stop needing meaning, when you drop the performance, when you no longer fear the void, you start to live lightly. Not because you found the answer, but because you stopped pretending there was a question. There's a moment, subtle, unannounced, when you realize that everything you've been running toward isn't there. Not because it's far, but because it never existed. The career, the love, the awakening, the one day it'll all make sense. You realize that you weren't moving toward meaning. You were running from emptiness, and now you're standing still. Now you hear the silence you've been avoiding. And it's not cruel, it's peaceful. People don't fear death. They fear the moment they understand that life had no climax. That it was not a novel, not a symphony, not a movie with a twist ending, but a continuous unfolding of seconds that never quite added up. And that's the betrayal. You lived as if it all pointed somewhere. You thought the suffering was currency, a cost for something greater. But it wasn't. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, said Nietzsche. But what if your why was an illusion the entire time? Would you still keep going? Or would you finally start living? We search for meaning because we believe it will save us. But sometimes, meaning is the very thing we need to be saved from. It makes us obedient, anxious, afraid to be still. We stay in places that destroy us just to prove it wasn't pointless. We love people who no longer love us just to preserve the narrative. We look for epiphanies, but all we find is echo. And then something strange happens. You stop expecting. You stop interpreting, you stop searching. And what remains is not despair, it's awareness. You begin to notice the small things, the way your breath pauses before a sigh, the way dust floats in light, the way a stranger's face softens when you thank them with sincerity. These moments have no moral, they aren't deep, they just are. And in that being, there's something stronger than meaning. There's presence, not mindfulness, not spirituality, just the raw, clear truth of existence, unfiltered by interpretation. The shovel is in your hand. You've been digging this whole time, thinking you'd hit treasure. And now you're waist deep in the hole, exhausted, covered in dirt, breathless. What if the only way out is to stop digging? What if the freedom you've been seeking was just this? To lay down the shovel, climb out of the hole and walk, not toward meaning but toward experience? He who despairs of the human condition is a coward, but he who has hope for it is a fool. Albert Camus. Maybe it doesn't need to mean anything. Maybe it just needs to happen. Maybe it already is. And that terrifying, beautiful, unbearable simplicity is what you were never taught to hold. But now it's here, and you're still breathing. Sometimes, the deepest kind of courage is not to keep searching, but to sit with the silence, to stop running, and to feel the weight of existence without trying to fix it. If this video spoke to you, even in the quiet, invisible corners of your mind, then you're not alone. You're part of something rare, a space where we dare to ask the questions no one wants to answer. Creating content like this isn't easy. It takes time, honesty, and the willingness to walk into the darkness, not just for ourselves, but for each other. If you feel this work has meaning, if it gave you something real, consider becoming a member of this channel. You'll gain access to exclusive content, deeper reflections, and a community of minds that think like yours, that feel like yours. And if you'd like to go one step further, you can now support the channel directly through the Super Thanks feature. It's a small gesture, but it helps us create more, better, braver, truer. But hear this clearly: just by watching, sharing, and staying present, you've already done more than enough. You are seen, you are appreciated, you are part of this. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of meaning we can live with. Thank you. Deeply. Stay close. And keep questioning.